Today we're going to talk about one of the most underrated fallen flag railroads in my opinion, the legendary Monon, nicknamed the Hoosier Line. The Monon operated for 74 years until merging with the Louisville and Nashville Railroad in 1971. We'll take a look at both active and inactive portions of the railroad's former main line between Chicago and Louisville. But first, let's go to the Monon Connection Railroad Museum in the railroad's namesake town to find out more about where it all began. You would be hard-pressed to find a railroad museum with a larger collection pertaining to a specific railroad than the Monon Connection Museum. If an item or piece of railroad equipment ever wore the Monon's name, it lives here now. Everything from dishes to poker chips to signals to rolling stock representing the Hoosier Line can be found under this roof. In fact, this is the largest private collection of railroad artifacts that the public can visit in the United States. But I'm getting distracted with statistics. Let's talk more about what the Monon Railroad was and why it was important to central Indiana. The roots of the railroad can be dated back to 1847, when the New Albany and Salem Railroad was first chartered. After 50 years of setbacks, poor revenue, and more identity changes, the railroad was reformed into the Chicago, Indianapolis, and Louisville Railway, nicknamed the Monon. What makes Monon stand out among the hundreds of other fallen flags in the United States was their commitment to the education system in the state of Indiana, specifically collegiate-level universities and colleges. The railroad served 7 different universities across the state, those being Purdue University, Wabash College, DePauw University, Indiana University, Butler, St. Joseph's, and the West Baden Northwood Institute. The railroad was proud of their contribution to higher education in Indiana and had multiple liveries that were in conjunction with the colors of some of those schools. The railroad painted their engines in black and gold to represent Purdue and DePauw, and their passenger equipment in red and white, the colors of Wabash and Indiana. I can't think of any other railroad this aware and committed to their role in connecting students with their hometowns and families. That absolutely makes the Monon stand out when talking about other historic North American railroads. So, what happened to the railroad's main line from Chicago to Louisville? Well, as I mentioned earlier, the Monon was absorbed by the L&N in 1971, and the L&N would go on to become part of CSX as we know them today. Unfortunately, to say the Monon's line is a shell of what it once was is a huge understatement. A significant portion of the southern half of the main line is abandoned and currently being transformed into a rail trail, as seen here in my shots around Mitchell, Indiana. That's not the only part of the Monon system that has faced abandonment either. However, the railroad does still remain active in certain points. For starters, the branch line to French Lick, Indiana remains partially active by way of the French Lick Scenic Railroad. The Monon's main channel is also still active in the northern half of the state, from Lafayette to Hammond. One of the small towns this railroad rolls through is Battleground, Indiana, and that's where we'll join up with the CSX train M642, and close out the video with a good old-fashioned train chase of one of the only regularly scheduled trains left on the Monon Railroad.